Hello, geometry students. We're going to continue on section 8-6, which deals with law of sines and law of cosines. We covered law of sines in our last lesson. When we use law of sines, we're looking for an angle and a side opposite is what we're looking for. And so the law of sines is the sine of an angle, A, and then the side opposite of it we call little a, and then we equal it to, set up a proportion, sine of another angle, we'll call it B, and then the side opposite, which would be little b. And then you have an angle C2 that you could use, sine of angle C over little c. So you're looking for an angle and a side opposite when you're using law of sines. Today we're going to focus on the law of cosines, and you have those already on your paper. I'm not going to go through how we arrive at the law of cosines. I did that with the law of sines, but the law of cosines is a lot more complicated. If you're interested in how exactly that formula comes up, why don't you Google that and look on YouTube for an explanation. When we look at the law of cosines, remember angle B has little b across from it, angle A has little a across from it, and angle C has little c across from it. And so why don't you take a minute and look at that pattern. All right, now I have done the side of B equals a squared plus c squared minus 2ac cosine of B. And then I have c squared equals a squared plus b squared minus 2ab cosine of c. Notice that I have not written an equation yet for a squared. Looking at that pattern, why don't you pause the video here and see if you can write the equation if you were looking for the side A. So a squared equals, pause the video and fill that in. Okay, so now I'm looking at a squared and I'm finding the pattern here. In b squared, I take the other two sides and square them. So I'm going to take the other two sides here. If I've got a, I'm going to have b squared and c squared there, minus 2, notice, here's the a and the c, and those were the two things right here, so I'm going to have my b and my c, and then cosine, the angle, notice the angle is the same as the side you're looking for, so I'm going to do cosine of a. So what you need to really do is memorize that pattern there for finding a side or an angle. You don't need to memorize all three of them, but you just need to know that pattern. When are we going to use the law of cosines? Well, if you don't have an angle and a side opposite, that's when you would probably use that. If I have a right angle, I'm going to use my right triangle trigonometry. If I have an angle and a side opposite, then I'm going to use my law of sines. Law of cosines works in all the other situations. So those other situations, people, would be if you know all three sides and you're looking for an angle, that would be one situation where you use the law of cosines. The other situation for the law of cosines would be if you have two sides and the angle between those two sides. That's called the contained angle. Okay, let's look at some of our examples. Now, I'm just going to write one of the law of cosines down here because I can't see it anymore. So if I've got a squared, then I have the other two sides squared. So that would be b squared plus c squared minus 2. Then I take the b and the c, and then it's the cosine of this angle, so angle A. So I've just written one down. I'm not writing all three down. I'm just talking about that pattern. So I'm looking at number 1. I have to decide if I'm going to use the law of sines or the law of cosines or right triangle trigonometry. I don't have a right angle, so it's not right triangle trigonometry. Law of cosines would be an angle and a side opposite relationship. And at this point I'm saying, oh, I'm looking at angle X and I've got 10. But you need two of them, people. And I do not have a second one. 12 does not have an angle with it, and neither does 11. So law of sines is not an option in number 1. And you're saying, well, of course not, because that's what we're learning, cosines. That's what we're going to be using. So we're going to use law of cosines also. I have all three sides here, and I'm looking for an angle. I'm looking for the angle. So I'm looking actually for the angle. So that's going to be my missing piece. So I'm missing angle B. So in my formula, I really have to have 10 by itself then, because in my formula, if I'm looking for the angle, the side opposite needs to be by itself. So I'm going to go 10 squared equals the other two sides squared. So I'm going to take 11 squared, 12 squared minus 2, these two numbers times multiplying by 2, and then I'm going to have cosine. The angle is B that I'm looking for. Right? I'm going to go ahead and do the math. I'm going to take 10 squared, 100. 12 squared, 144. Whoops, I got these switched around on my paper, my apologies. 11 squared, 121 minus, now multiplying all this together, people say take 2 times 11 times 12. That gets you 264. Cosine B. Okay, now this is like an algebra equation, people. Our goal is to isolate the b, so now we need to take care of our algebra. We need to add those two together. So 100 equals, this is 265 minus 264 cosine B. Now usually at this point, somebody is saying, hey, put these two together, people. That is not correct. If you look here for just a minute, if I give you a simple algebra problem, 10 equals 6 minus 4x. Back in algebra, would you guys put those two together? You wouldn't, would you? The 4 is connected with the x, right? So same thing here. Those are connected. This is 264 times the cosine of b. So don't be taking 265 minus 264 and writing 1 down. That's not correct, people. Over here you would minus your 6, right? So we got to minus our 265 and minus our 265. When I do that, I'm going to get a negative 165 equals. Make sure you bring this negative sign down with that 264. Cosine B. All right, the goal is to get B alone. So we first need to move the negative 264. We move that, people. All right, so right now what I have, people, this negative and that negative makes a positive. So I have 165 over 264. And then I have cosine B. Our goal is to get B alone. So cosine needs to move. No, it's not divide by cosine, people. If you're thinking that, you got to use your inverse function. That way, cosine and inverse cosine cancel each other out. Now you have B equals cosine inverse 165 divided by 264. You should know how to punch that in your calculator if you've been working on that. I'm going to give you that to the nearest degree. So the measure of angle B is approximately 51 degrees. I'm looking at number 2. I don't need this algebra anymore. Let's get a divider going here. All right, as I look at number 2, I'm thinking right triangle trigonometry, law of sines, or law of cosines. Why don't you pause the video and you make the decision? I'm thinking it's going to be law of cosines because I have the angle and side opposite, the angle and side opposite. So I'm doing the law of sines. Did I say law of sines there, people? Sine of x. Angle side opposite is 38. Sine of 36. Side opposite, 34. Go ahead and cross multiply. Sine x times 34. Sine 36 times 38. You've got to get x alone, so this has to say divide by 34. Okay, so now you've got sine x equals sine of 36 times 38 divided by 34. Once again, you've got to get rid of the word sine, the trig function. It's not divide. It's multiply by the sine inverse. Okay, we just covered this in our last section. These cancel. Multiply by sine inverse. Kind of tight. X equals sine inverse. Now type that all in your calculator. Sine 36 times 38, and then all divided by 34. When I do that, I'm going to get x to equal approximately 41 degrees. Okay, let's move on to our next problem. Number 3. You can do that one on your own if you would like. It's 53 degrees. Number 4, we're looking at that and we're trying to decide law of sines, law of cosines, or right triangle trigonometry. There's no right angle, so right triangle trigonometry is not a choice. I don't have an angle and a side opposite relationship for 2 of them. I've got 1, but I don't have 2. So sines is out. I'm going to have to do law of cosines. So I'm looking for x. So that's the side by itself. Take the other 2 sides and square them. Minus 2. Remember, these are the 2 that get multiplied by 2. So 18 and 28. Oh, I'm tight on room. And then cosine, that's the angle opposite, 59. Now, people, you can type all of this into your calculator. It'll do all the operations for you. So, pause the video and go ahead and type that in. When I get that, I'm going to get about 58.84. Keep your calculator full. Now I need to square root it. X is going to equal approximately 24.3. So in your classwork tomorrow, you're going to have law of sines and law of cosines all mixed up together, and you're going to have to determine which one you're going to use. You guys have a great night, and I'll see you tomorrow in class.